Hi guys, welcome to Digital Tech Join. In this video series, we are going to develop our first web API using .NET Framework 6.0 using Visual Studio 2022. Now, before we get deep dive into the development of API which will perform the CRUD operation, let us first understand the difference between 5.0 and 6.0 framework. I have opened both the Project Explorer, one having a .NET Framework 5.0 and the second one 6.0. Now if you look at the .NET Framework 5.0 and 6.0, there is a one file missing in the Framework 6.0, and that is the startup.cs. Now what was happening in .NET Framework 5.0, there was a program file which had a main method which internally called the startup class, and inside the startup class we add the dependency injection services and the middleware. Now in .NET 6.0, which is this one, they have clubbed the startup.cs class code in program.cs. Not only that, if you look at the program.cs, it has hardly 6 lines of code. So what Microsoft does is that they have reduced the complexity of a boilerplate. The concept here is less number of codes. I will show one more example. If you go to .NET Framework 5.0, there is a default class weather forecast which is created by default. Now in this class you see there is using statement, there is a namespace which is a project name, and then there are public properties. Now here if you look at Framework 6.0, same for class, I'll just show it to you. You see there is no using statement, so and still there is no error in this method public datetime date, because somewhere the libraries required, that is using system, is implicitly referenced in .NET Framework 6.0 project. Now if you really need to know where it has been implicitly declared, then I'll show you in your project. Click on show all files, go to object folder which is a compiled folder directory, go to debug, and then in your .NET Framework 6.0 there is a file which is your project name .global using.cs. Now here by default Microsoft has placed all the commonly required libraries and references. The idea is that when you are creating your own classes, there is less number of lines of code which you had to explicitly define. Now if you want you can create your own class in your project root directory and copy all these global usings and paste it over there. This will still work, and you can also use your commonly project references like your API, your data models, so that you don't have to go ahead and explicitly define the same in all the classes. So this is something Microsoft have intentionally done to reduce the number of lines of code and to make the code file look clean and crisp. Now let's go ahead. So this was some of the distinct changes which I like to highlight it. Now let's go ahead and create our project, our web API project, which will perform all the CRUD operation. Now I am using MS SQL database. I have created a database called web API demo, and there is a table called users, and we have designed the user table having the ID, username, email, mobile, and password field. Okay, and currently this table does not have any records. So let's go ahead, let's open a project in Framework 6.0. I won't require this project now. 5.0 framework. Close it. Okay, so first thing we are going to do is that we are going to click on the app setting and we add the connection string. So we added a connection string, and it's a web API demo, the database. Then we go ahead and create our entity class, our data model class. We add a folder called, and we add a class user entity. We define the properties. I already have it in my file, so we define this. So we have an ID, username, email, mobile, and password. Yeah. So we have defined our user entity class. Now we go ahead and define our data context class. We create a folder called data and we add the data context class. Okay, and before we write in the code, we go to our package manager and install the required libraries. So first is Microsoft Entity Framework Core, the latest one 6.0.0. Install it. So then we go ahead and install the SQL because we are using our database SQL. So we use Microsoft Entity Framework Core.sql, the latest one. I accept. Just one more thing I like to highlight about the global using is that this is a project level setting. So if you want to disable it, you can go to this directory, the CS project file, and if you look at the settings, implicitly using is enabled. That is why when you created a project, by default it compiled it and created that global file where all your references was kept. So I just want to highlight that if you don't want this setting, which you can still go ahead and disable it, or else if this is a very good practice that all your common references are there in a single file, you can create your own class file and copy these usings in that class files. So it makes the same impact. Okay, so coming back to our work, so we have reference. Now let's create a data context class. So there are some references which we will have to do. Using okay. And using the Microsoft.entityframework.core. DB context. we are going to create a constructor. Sorry, it's not deep. And then we define the public DB set, and we refer a user entity class. That was a new feature, we can just simply use that. So we have created a DB set class. So our data contest class is ready, our model class is ready. Let's go ahead and configure the program.cs. So we will inject the connection string over here, the add service. So we say builder dot services dot add db contest, and refer our data context class. Options, dot use SQL. So it's not coming because we have not referenced the core system dot using Microsoft. Configuration dot get connection string default connection. Default connection is a connection string name which we have mentioned in the app setting.json default connection. So we have injected the connection string. That's the code over here. Now let's go ahead and create a controller. Let's add a controller, empty one, name it users. Now this is a web API, so let's add the declaratives controller. This is how the methods will be called. Now let's add the methods. So we are going to create CRUD operation that will create, read, update and delete records from user table. So let's first reference the data contest class. Using our data class, which is over here. Now let's create a controller class and inject this. So we say generate constructor and for this. So this is done. Now let's go ahead and let's create a first get method which will get all the records. User entity, we need to refer a entity class and say get users. let's reference our entity class, and we just return underscore db dot contains users dot to list. This will fetch us all the users. Now if you want to fetch the record basis in ID, then let's write the routine for that. HTTP get ID. This will be the same method as copy paste here, but we will pass we don't require this. We don't require the list object, and we say get user, and we pass in the int ID. And we are going to say db content user dot find, and we pass in the ID. So this will return the user for the ID which we pass in the parameter. Now let's go ahead and add routine to add new users in our table. HTTP post, HTTP post, name it as add user. Cool. Now let's go ahead and add the routine. Public async task action result action result will return a string, and we say add user, and we pass user entity register object. Fine. Now let's go add user, new user entity, username, tap to accept, email, tap to accept. This is how so easy. So we are saving a lot of time. Tap to accept, tap to accept, and then password. Tap to accept. This is the last object, and then we put a semicolon. So we have passed the parameters and the value to our variable user. Then we say db context dot users add accept, and then superb. And then we return the message saying user added successfully. So this adds a user in our database. Now let's go ahead and create routine to update the users. So we copy the same routine over with some checks. We first need to check the user exists for which the update request has been initiated. Say update user details, and then we change the method name to update user. Okay, it's not register, it's update object. Okay, and then we first check whether the user is valid. So we say var current user underscore db contest dot users dot where s dot id equals to update id and then we user entity. Clear. If it is null, now we check if current user is null. It's not null, sorry, it's not null. That means the user was found. Then we pass the values to the current users. And then this also gets changed. Oh, so that's okay. So sorry. So name dot email dot mobile and then dot password. So we have passed it, and if it is null, let's add a else clause. If it is null, we say user details not found. And if the details are found, just and we save the updated records. So db contest dot save changes, and then we return message. So it's already there, so we say user details updated successfully. So we are done with the add method, we are done with the update method, and the last one is delete. Let's go and create method to delete record. HTTP delete user, there's public async action result string delete user, and we pass the ID. So we check if ID is less than or equals to 0, then we say return bad request not a valid user. And then we use the same line to check whether the record exists over here. And then if current user is not null, else. So the current user is not null, then we go ahead and delete the record. So db contest dot entry current user dot state entity state dot deleted. And then save changes. Otherwise, we say return user details not found for deletion. And then if everything is fine, we return user details deleted successfully. So here is a code. First is injecting the db contest class in our constructor user controller, getting all the users, getting single user based on the ID, adding a user, and then updating a user, and then deleting the user. Let's go ahead and run our first web API developed in framework 6.0. Let's build it. Oh, that's great. There's no error found. That is always good for a developer. Let's go ahead and run it now. And let's test it using our Postman. Postman is almost up, but our application is still to load. Yes, starting. There's some previous hits which I have used. It's just delete this. Yes, it's loading now. So this is a base URL. We'll just copy this and let's try our code. So first we will have to add record. So I select post and then I enter this add record. I'll just copy this syntax. Fine. So post I select and then I say add user. right? That's the name I've given, right? Let me just check. So then it's add user. Okay, it's add user, and then we click on the body and then select JSON and paste the mail body. We enter the name John. Sorry, ABC, and let's. You can also put a breakpoint over here just to debug our first call, and click on send. Okay, not found. Add users. Add users. Fine. So request has come to our controller method add user. Let's add. Yes, it got successfully added and it returned the message. So we see the user got successfully added. Now let's go ahead and call our fetch all records. So it's, let's say, get all users. Create a new request. Get, we select get, we pass that, and we say send. As you are able to get the record that we just added. Now let's add one more record. Let's remove this breakpoint and run it. So even this got added successfully. Let's go ahead again and fetch those records. Yes. Get and records. We should get two records now, John and Richard. If you want to fetch record based on ID, for example, I want to fetch Richard, I simply have to pass the ID and it will fetch only Richard, because we had created a method to fetch user based on the ID. Now let's go ahead and update a record. We say update user details. Postman, we say post. We will have to use Okay, so let's say select post, and instead of add user we say update users. I'm passing these values along with the ID. So ID is 2. Okay, and I'm going to change the email address from Yahoo to Gmail and change the number and name also, Thomas. Okay, let's trigger an update command. Update user details updated successfully. Let's go ahead and fetch the records of Richard. You see the records got updated. Richard Thomas, Richard, and the mobile and the password. So
1 second.
So basically we have updated the record also, and now finally let's go ahead and delete the record. So delete takes a parameter ID, so let's go ahead, copy this, use the delete verb, HTTP verb, users, and say delete, and pass in the parameter ID equals to 1. So the first record will be deleted. Let's go ahead and edit it. User details deleted successfully. Now let's go and fetch the records. Use get users and submit. So we are able to see only one record. The first record got deleted. So guys, we complete a demo. We have shown you how to create and develop your first web API in .NET Framework 6.0, and also highlighted some of the key differences in .NET Framework 5.0 and 6.0. I hope you like this video. Kindly please do subscribe and like the channel. Thank you.